Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that acts as your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed.
That's right. We dig through your sources, the articles, the research, even our own notes.
And pull out those key bits of knowledge, the insights you really need.
Yep. The goal is always surprising facts, maybe a little humor, and definitely the context.
Without overwhelming you.
Yeah.
So today we are diving deep into some really critical global updates.
Uh-huh. We've got the shifting dynamics in a major European conflict.
A truly shocking humanitarian crisis that's unfolding right now in the Middle East.
And a really significant global policy reversal. Something that could affect us all.
Exactly. So, as always, our mission is clear, concise, captivating insights from some pretty complex stuff. Ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with Ukraine. The front line there, it's incredibly fluid, as always.
Moscow just recently claimed they captured Dakhnoy. That's Dakhoi in the Dnipropetrovsk region.
Right, but, and this is important right off the bat, this specific claim, it hasn't been confirmed. Not by Ukraine, not by Russia's own defense ministry officially.
So still very much an evolving picture on that specific town.
But if we step back, look at the bigger picture, data from Peace State, that's a Western think tank, it shows some pretty undeniable Russian territorial gains. As of June 28th, Russia controls over 113,500 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory.
And the really striking thing is that's an increase of almost 1,000 square kilometers.
In just 2 months. That's significant.
What's fascinating here is, well, it's not just the tactical gains on the ground, right? It's how Moscow seems to be strategically using the perception of momentum. These advancements, they look like they're directly tied to a larger diplomatic strategy, trying to create this sense of inevitability,
To push Kyiv to the negotiating table.
Exactly, pushing them towards peace, but, and this is key, strictly on Putin's terms, it feels like psychological pressure as much as anything else.
And Putin's terms, what are we talking about specifically?
He's laid it out. Ukraine has to withdraw from 4 regions Russia now almost completely controls.
Which, understandably, Ukraine just sees as a disguised surrender. No surprise there.
None at all.
And then you have former President Trump weighing in, suggesting these conditions, maybe they could be seen as realistic.
Yeah, that definitely raised some eyebrows.
So from the Russian Ministry of Defense side, what are they reporting?
Well, their reports detail pretty substantial Ukrainian losses, they claim.
Yeah.
In just one 24-hour period, they said 6 armored vehicles lost in the center battle group area.
Okay.
And another 6 artillery systems in the east battle group area. They also reported making advances near Dimitrov, Krasnoyarsk, places like that, in Dnipropetrovsk.
And it's not just ground movements, is it? We're hearing about coordinated attacks.
Right. Drones, missiles, tactical aviation, the whole package.
Targeting things like a naval oil terminal, drone assembly sites.
Ammunition depots, temporary troop positions. They also alleged foreign mercenaries were hit.
But it's definitely not all one way. Ukraine's keeping the pressure on, too, especially that Crimea bridge.
Always the bridge.
Just last night, reports of it being closed temporarily. Explosions, intense air defense activity over in Kyiv.
Yeah, local telegram channels were showing pictures, skies lit up. The bridge lights apparently went out for a bit.
So what's the official word on damage?
Well, the Russian MODA said they shot down 5 Ukrainian drones overnight. But, importantly, they reported no confirmed damage to the bridge itself or to Kyiv.
And traffic resumed pretty quickly.
After about an hour, yeah.
For Kyiv, that bridge isn't just symbolic, is it? It's massively strategic.
Oh, absolutely. Russia built it after the 2014 annexation. It's the vital logistical link, right? Connects mainland Russia to their forces in the south of Ukraine.
So hitting it is a major strategic objective.
And this latest incident, it wasn't isolated. Remember, Ukraine's SBU chief, Vasyl Malyuk, he confirmed back in early June a 3rd operation against the bridge.
Right, I remember that.
Said they detonated 100 kilos of explosives under the submerged bases. He had that quote.
Right.
God loves the Trinity, and the SBU always finishes what it starts.
And never repeats itself. Quite the statement.
It was. And Russian media later reported their FSB caught a Ukrainian agent allegedly involved in prepping that attack.
Okay, let's widen the lens a bit. Geopolitics. Trump and sanctions on Russia. It feels like mixed signals, right?
Very much so. It seems like part of his, negotiation style, playing different angles with Russia, Europe, Ukraine, even his own supporters back home.
Like this push from Senator Lindsey Graham for new, heavy sanctions.
Yeah, including these huge 500% tariffs on countries still buying Russian oil, like China and India.
And Graham claims Trump supports it, wants a swift vote, calls it a great advance.
That's what Graham says.
Yeah.
He seems to view these sanctions as a way to force Putin to negotiate seriously.
But there's a catch, isn't there?
Always. Even if Congress passed something like that, Trump would still hold the veto pen. So it's complex.
How's the Kremlin reacting to all this talk?
Their spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, he definitely took note. Didn't mince words either. Called Graham an inveterate Russophobe.
Ouch!
And basically questioned if these kinds of measures actually help resolve anything. Standard Kremlin response, really.
So if these sanctions did happen, what's the real impact?
Okay, let's unpack this. The critical insight, I think, is that the impact wouldn't just be on Russia's economy, though that would be significant.
Right.
It could fundamentally shake up the whole balance of international relations. Think about China, India, the U.S. itself. It could force a major realignment in global trade, diplomacy, huge potential ripple effects.
Okay, moving from that conflict, we need to talk about Syria. There's a critical report out today from Reuters.
Yes, a really disturbing one. It revisits this wave of attacks against the Alawite minority back in March 7th to 9th.
And the findings are just shocking. At least 1,500 Alawites killed. Systematic, coordinated attacks. It looks like retaliation for a pro-Assad rebellion.
The details are horrific. One case they highlight, a man named Suleiman Rashid Saad, murdered, his heart reportedly removed, left on his body.
Oh my God.
And the killers apparently called his father, taunting him, challenging him to come get the body. Just pure brutality.
And this wasn't isolated. Reuters found 40 locations, massacres, kidnappings, looting, entire families killed in some places.
And the determining factor often was just one question. Are you Sunni or Alawite? Your answer decided your fate.
Who's behind this? Does the report point fingers?
It directly implicates the new Syrian government, the one led by Ahmed Alwa. Remember, he's the former commander of HTS, that al-Qaeda offshoot.
Right.
The report names specific units aligned with the government.
Yes.
The General Security Service, the Sultan Suleiman Shah militia, others too.
And many of these groups, they're already under sanctions, aren't they? From the EU for human rights abuses?
Correct. But, interestingly, the U.S. hasn't specifically sanctioned anyone for these March attacks yet.
Which is notable, especially when you remember Trump previously praised Alwa, suggested maybe suspending sanctions.
It's a disconnect, yeah. And while Alwa publicly condemned the killings, said there'd be investigations.
The Reuters findings suggest otherwise.
They point pretty strongly towards direct government involvement. Suggests it was more of a calculated campaign, not just rogue element.
What's the situation like now for Alawites in those areas?
It's dire. Some coastal villages are described as practically empty. Thousands have fled, seeking refuge at a nearby Russian base.
Just terrible.
There's this palpable fear, you see, that the government used crushing that pro-Assad rebellion as a pretext, a cover for sectarian cleansing in historically Alawite regions.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You have these localized massacres, right? Driven by this new government trying to brutally consolidate power. But it exposes something deeper about Syria.
What's that?
The country is so fractured, internal conflicts are now seemingly being weaponized for actual sectarian cleansing. It's like it's cementing a de facto partition on the ground, one that international actors just don't seem equipped to handle.
The fractures are incredibly deep, and finding a path to stability, it feels further away than ever.
The numbers coming out are just devastating. Alwa's government admits 350 deaths in Tartus, though they deny targeting Alawites specifically.
But then you have reports from villages like Amoktaria, Sonoba, 236 killed in Sonoba, mostly young people, mass executions reported.
And Banana, 253 bodies buried in one day. Jableh, 77 dead. It's horrific.
Grim details, too, about Alawite men being humiliated on video. And coordination. Attacks seemingly organized via Telegram groups, circulating target lists.
This all happened against that backdrop of political fragility you mentioned. The new government abolishing the Constitution, dissolving the army back in January.
Exactly. That pro-Assad rebellion was really the first big test of their unity, their control. And the response. It just ripped open these deep fissures, showed that many armed groups are still acting with total autonomy, total impunity.
Were there any counterexamples?
Yeah.
Anyone trying to stop it?
The report notes some Sunni leaders did try to protect Alawites, but the overwhelming feeling described by victims is one of, vengeance and deep, deep distrust.
So the fear of this escalating into a full-blown sectarian war, it's still very much a real concern.
Absolutely. This raises an important question. What are the long-term consequences when a government seems implicated in atrocities like this? And the international response is so uneven. It just deepens the fractures, doesn't it?
Makes stability seem almost impossible. Okay, let's shift gears again. A very different kind of story, but equally significant. A major reversal in global disarmament policy.
Yes, Ukraine has officially withdrawn from the Ottawa Convention. That's the treaty banning anti-personnel landmines.
And it's not just Ukraine, is it? There's a domino effect happening.
It seems so. Finland, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all NATO members, all bordering Russia. They've either left the treaty already or signaled they intend to.
Wow. That feels like a huge step backward.
It's a massive setback. This treaty was a landmark achievement at the end of the Cold War, signed back in '97, seen as real progress.
Its whole point was protecting civilians, right?
Exactly. Civilians make up something like over 80% of victims from these anti-personnel mines. It's horrific.
So why are these countries pulling out now? What's the logic?
It seems pretty clear. It's a direct response to Russia's extensive use of landmines in occupied parts of Ukraine over these last, 40 months of war.
So they feel exposed.
That's the perception, especially for these frontline states. They feel sticking to the treaty puts their own defenses at a serious disadvantage against what they see as this constant Russian threat, even if there's a truce someday.
And their argument is, well, Russia isn't part of the treaty anyway.
Right. Neither Russia, nor the U.S., nor China are signatories. So these countries are saying, why should we be bound by rules our main adversaries just ignore?
What's the collateral damage of this trend? Beyond just the symbolism.
It's severe. The international campaign to ban landmines, the ICBL, they're facing a major regression. And it's partly because U.S. funding for demining programs has been cut significantly.
How much are we talking?
The U.S. used to provide about 40% of the global total, over $300 million a year. That's a huge hit to demining efforts worldwide.
And meanwhile, the problem on the ground is getting worse.
Dramatically worse. There was a UN report just last month, June 2025. It called Ukraine the most mined country in the world.
Most mined. Wow.
And estimated around 800 civilian victims just from unexploded ordnance in Ukraine in 2025 alone. 800 people.
So you have this awful equation then. The supposed military advantage of mines slowing down the enemy versus this devastating long-term impact on ordinary people. Years, decades after the fighting stops.
It's a truly grim trade-off. Yeah. So what does this all mean? If we connect this to the bigger picture, the unraveling of the Ottawa Treaty, it's more than just about landmines.
How so?
It reflects this profound shift in how countries view international security. It signals that in this climate of, escalating perceived threats, those post-Cold War disarmament norms, they're rapidly eroding.
So countries are recalculating.
Exactly. Reevaluating defense strategies. It reopens the door to producing mines, using them, transferring them. You could see a remilitarization of border arsenals, as some put it.
Which puts civilians directly back in the crosshairs.
Directly. It's a clear signal, really, that the post-Cold War era is behind us, that optimism is gone.
Is anyone pushing back? Sticking with the treaty?
Well, Norway made a point of staying in. They also border Russia up in the Arctic. You said they want to preserve the moral stigma against using these weapons.
A symbolic stand, at least. Wow. Okay, that was a lot. A really deep dive into some heavy but absolutely vital information today.
It really covers the spectrum, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
From direct conflict in Ukraine, tied into high-stakes diplomacy,
to that horrifying humanitarian crisis in Syria, exposing those deep sectarian fault lines.
And then this retreat from a key disarmament treaty, signaling a much wider and frankly alarming shift in global security norms.
And the key thing is, these aren't separate boxes. They're all interconnected, aren't they? Painting this picture of a world facing really complex challenges, shifting alliances.
I think that's the main takeaway for you, listening. The sheer interconnectedness. Military actions become diplomatic leverage. Internal conflicts explode into sectarian violence, eroding norms in one area that cascades globally.
Right.
So navigating this landscape, it means understanding not just the headlines, but the currents underneath. The motivations, the ripple effects.
Definitely. Which leaves us, I think, with a final provocative thought for you to mull over.
Go on.
Given everything we've discussed, the escalating conflicts, the unraveling of these international norms, what's the true cost of security for nations today? And maybe more importantly, what new forms of international cooperation, or perhaps an alarming lack of cooperation, are we likely to see emerge in the years ahead?
A lot to think about there.
Something to consider until our next deep dive.